Is the Bible a human book or a divine book? Obviously, it's human. You can see that in the styles of the writers. But it's also divine.
Compared to other manuscripts in antiquity, the New Testament manuscript tradition is very rich.
I do believe that the Gospels are true history.
The events surrounding Jesus of Nazareth changed the world. But are these events based on actual facts of history? Specifically, can we trust the ultimate sources on the life of Christ, the Gospels, and other writings of the New Testament?
The Gospels are true history. At the beginning of the Gospel of Luke, Luke tells us that he made a very careful investigation to give an accurate account of the life and teaching of Jesus Christ. So even though his Gospel is designed to encourage people to follow him, to believe him, to trust him, to become disciples, he assures us right from the beginning that it's based on accurate history. And we see that as well in the other gospel accounts.
Consider some key points about the reliability of the four biblical gospels, beginning with the fact that they are based on eyewitness testimony.
The New Testament Gospels, written in the first century, were written at a time when many eyewitnesses were still living. In fact, statistical studies have been done that show that. And so the idea of inventing things that Jesus didn't teach, telling stories about things he actually didn't do, nobody could get away with that. There's eyewitness tradition that stands behind all four Gospels. In fact, this is explicitly stated at the end of the Gospel of John.
The four Gospels that we have, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were written by those who were close to Jesus. They were eyewitnesses. In Luke's case, he studied things very, very carefully. No reason to believe that the others didn't do that. And these books were written within a generation, within 40, 50 years or so of when Jesus was actually on earth.
Another compelling aspect of the Gospels is that they do not contradict each other, but they do supplement each other.
One way to try to understand the reason we have four Gospels is to think about an object of art that's in the middle of a room. And in each corner you have four very skilled artists who each give a faithful rendition of that piece of art, even if it is a different rendition. When you put all those renditions together, you get a complementary, not contradictory view of the entirety of this piece of art. So let's say the piece of art is three-dimensional and has various media. So that's one way of understanding why we have four Gospels and how they can cohere.
The Gospels describe cities and places and names of people in history. Can all this be historically verified?
We find some of the same people and places and events that are mentioned inside the Bible, mentioned also in secular records, pagan records outside of the Bible. And for a historian, this is a remarkable demonstration that the sources that we have inside of Scripture are very reliable indeed.
The archaeologist knows where to dig. The archaeologist knows how to understand what is unearthed. And so I've done archaeology work. I've been a volunteer at various digs. I know these archaeologists. And they make use of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John all the time. They might not be Christians. Some of them don't even believe in God. But they know good sources when they see them. And they regard Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the New Testament Gospels, as good sources.
Another matter of import deals with the canon of the New Testament. In other words, why these particular books were recognized as being Scripture while others weren't. The fact being, the working canon of the New Testament came relatively soon after these books were written.
The New Testament writings were immediately recognized at the lowest level, you might say, at the ground floor, by individual pastors and church congregations. They recognized their authority, read them publicly, and that was the first step toward what we call canonical recognition.
The four Gospels, universally recognized from the start. The book of Acts, earliest church history by Luke. The whole Pauline corpus, that is the body of all those letters that St. Paul wrote that comprise almost half of our New Testament. The letter of James and the letter of Peter, the first letter of Peter. And that is the core of the canon. The other writings were one by one coming in a little bit later. the Johannine letters, for example. The last two to make it would be 2 Peter and the book of Revelation. Book of Revelation's a highly difficult book to understand, very symbolic, and we can understand that. But certainly, by the 200s, that canon is intact.
But what about these other later so-called Gospels that the Da Vinci Code and many others maintain to be authentic? It's important to note that these were not written by the apostles or their associates.
They came along in the 2nd century, 3rd century, and what they're trying to do is to change the story. They're not historical. They really don't tell us what the Jesus of history taught.
One of the things that I find interesting is that there are scholars who supposedly have left the faith because they think they have found more reliable evidence about Jesus than is found in the New Testament. And that is nonsense. If you look, for example, at the Gnostic Gospels, you discover that they are fraudulent, clearly. They represent no history. They are a synthesis between Greek thought and Christianity, and oftentimes contain absolute nonsense.
Another vital detail concerning the biblical Gospels and the New Testament in general is the plethora of ancient manuscripts we have to this day that confirm their authenticity.
We can trust the New Testament because we have many, many manuscripts. Many of them are very old, getting back within a couple of generations of when the manuscripts were written. The record of the preservation of the New Testament writings, and especially the Gospels, is unparalleled. The Greco-Roman writings, classical writings, which, by the way, most scholars have no problem accepting as they are, they do not have anywhere near the attestation.
Another observation made in regards to the reliability of the New Testament is that many times when an original book was written, it was the common practice to make an immediate copy of it.
One important thing to know is that when a New Testament writing was written, it wasn't just a single copy that was then sent out on a fast boat taken across the Mediterranean to its destination, but there was at least a second copy retained. And so there would be two originals, and sometimes even more than that, that would be then sent out in various destinations. This helped preserve the text and stabilize the text. The text of the New Testament was so stable because the autographs remained in use, in circulation for generations, and many times were copied. So it wasn't copies of copies of copies, but many copies of the original. And that's why the text is so accurate and reliable.
When you boil it all down, all of these critical attacks, which have repeatedly been made against Scripture for about 20 centuries now, are nothing new, and really in many ways they are people trying to get attention, using a pea shooter, trying to demolish the Rock of Gibraltar. No question about it, the Gospels are very reliable and a very reliable Scripture.